What is up, guys? It's your boy Rick. No Galahorn, no raiding with us. Kackis here, and today we've got some brand spanking new Destiny 2 news, courtesy of the Bungie weekly update that has just gone live, revealing official information. And so, let's get started. And holy crap, this is probably the biggest TWAB that we've gotten in years. Bungie is completely overhauling all abilities in Destiny 2. So, one of the biggest changes is individualized cooldowns. Previously, an ability, so melee, grenades, supers, they would pretty much be balanced the same. So all grenades would roughly, aside from stasis grenades, have the same cooldown, which of course led to balance issues. Now, every single one of these abilities, so each different kind of grenade, is going to have its own unique cooldown and therefore can be tuned separately. So here's an example of what that looks like. Firstly, for the Flux grenade, this is getting a huge change. So they've increased the base cooldown from right now 82 seconds all the way up to 182 seconds. So it's going to recharge incredibly slow, but they've increased the attached detonation damage from 150 to 250, so now it's going to be able to one-shot kill in PvP. They've also increased the damage versus PvE combatants by a further 15%. They've removed projectile tracking, they've added a small amount of aim assist, and they've increased the throw speed by 117%, and now it sticks to all surfaces. However, we actually have an example going in the opposite direction with Firebolt Grenade. So they've reduced the base cooldown from 82 seconds down to 64 seconds, but they've also reduced the damage per bolt from 90 down to 65. However, they've increased the PvE damage by 15%. So those are completely two different directions you can take grenades. Flux grenades, way higher charge time, but one-shot kills. Firebolt Grenade, more about tickling and hurting your opponent really, but you can spam them like crazy. And here is an example of what you're going to be seeing going forward in your character customization screen. As you can see, the base cooldown is displayed for all of your abilities. Additionally, when you have your stat here, it's also going to display that. Something to note, the base cooldown is actually the time when you have tier 3 of the relevant stat, strength, discipline, etc., because the system technically penalizes you for going below tier 3, and that would mess with the base cooldown, so they're looking to change that in the future. By the way, it isn't just those two grenades that get 15% more damage against PvE combatants. All grenades, every single one, is doing 15% more against PvE combatants, so keep that in mind. But continuing from there, guys, supers are also all getting a big change. Firstly, right now, the passive generation of your super is a huge component of it, so you can just camp in the back and you will get your super. But Bungie says super regeneration will still have a passive component scaled by your intellect stat, but at a significantly reduced rate. On top of your passive regeneration, you will also gain super energy by dealing damage and taking damage to or from opponents. So essentially, they want you to be in the fray, actually participating in the gunfight, not waiting in the back for your super. So here are their goals for the super changes. They say, firstly, in PvE, super uptime should be relatively unchanged from the live game, if not slightly higher. Everybody should get at least one super in a 6v6 match that goes to the score or time limit as long as they engage in regular combat. Supers should be less frequent in 3v3 modes than in the live game, where 2 supers per match is a fairly regular occurrence. Primary weapon play should have a noticeable benefit in super energy regeneration, and different supers should come online at different times in a given match, and your super of choice should have an impact on how quickly it regenerates. Specifically, Bungie cites trying to negate the super o'clock time in PvP, you know, the time in the match where everyone's all popping their supers at the same time and it just turns into chaos, which I think is generally a good thing. So, here we have the different tiers of supers. So starting us off with tier 5, this is the fastest regeneration. We have Well of Radiance actually. Then in tier 4, so this is going to be slower than tier 5 and we're getting slower with each tier now. So tier 4, Blade Barrage and Silence and Squall. Silence and Squall is pretty darn good. That's a little sus, okay? But then tier 3, we have Shadow Shot, Burning Maul, Arc Staff, Nova Bomb, and Thunder Crash. Tier 2, so getting quite a bit slower, Golden Gun, Chaos Reach, Nova Warp, Storm Trance, Daybreak, and Sentinel Shield. And then tier 1, so this is the slowest regeneration, we have Spectral Blades, Fist of Havoc, Hammer of Soul, Glacial Quake, and Winter's Wrath. Now keep in mind, this tier list is setting things up for the future as Bungie moves to the Subclass 3.0 system, and with the launch of the Witch Queen, we get Void subclasses remade in this system. So Bungie does say that when that launches in February, they could exist in different tiers based on their potency. By the same token, Ward of Dawn, which is currently tied to the Sentinel Shield cooldown, will be moved to the tier 5 group as a standalone super with Void 3.0, which is actually a brand new piece of information. So now Ward of Dawn will now just become its own unique super, which is definitely going to give you less versatility in being able to choose which one to cast, but is also going to limit the amount of times you fat finger and cast the wrong one and suddenly you have a Sentinel Shield in a raid boss fight and you ruin the encounter. Yeah, been there, done that. Moving on from there, guys. The next thing Bungie talks about is non-super abilities. So here are the goals. Weapons are the primary way players engage with combat. Non-super abilities accentuate or augment the combat, but should rarely solve an encounter by themselves. Abilities have clear strengths, weaknesses, and counterplay, and build crafting is rewarding with moment-to-moment combat loop of destiny. Okay, so understanding that, Bungie says, with the 30th anniversary, we've taken a pass at a significant number of these elements. Across subclass perks, armor mods, and exotic armor pieces, we have tuned PvP energy regeneration separately from their base PvE values, which are not changing. So that is a very big deal. So, talking about subclass neutral game perks. So these perks have had their ability regeneration reduced by roughly 50% in PvP. We targeted perks that can either activate out of combat with a single button press, or those that were returning amounts of ability energy that were significantly out of brand. So here are all the things affected. Again, reduced by about 50%. So Whisper of Shards, the Stasis Fragment, Arc Web for Stormcaller Warlock, Rising Storm for Stormcaller Warlock, Ionic Traces for Stormcaller Warlock, Electrostatic Surge for Stormcaller Warlock, Aftershocks for Striker Titan, Inertia Override for Striker Titan, Benevolent Dawn for Dawnblade Warlock, Practice Makes Perfect for Gunslinger Hunter, Dark Matter for Voidwalker Warlock. Then we have subclass in super perks saying they scale down energy returns as you get kills in your super. These perks would result in supers being able to roam the map for much longer than is healthy for the game. So they said, we've rescaled this energy to decay more aggressively in PvP so that the minimum energy refund is reached roughly twice as quickly. However, in PvE, again, no change. So that is for Everlasting Fire with the Dawnblade Warlock, and then Trample with the Striker Titan. Moving on from there, exotic armor. They say each exotic below had a custom tuning pass focus on their ability energy return in PvP. So for the Frosties, no longer stacks multiplicatively in PvP with other regeneration buffs, is now an additive scaler, so not quite as effective, but no change in PvE. For the Heart of Inmost Light, ability energy regeneration scalars reduced by 50% in PvP, so reworking, so activating multiple abilities will now reliably result in multiple empowered stacks. The stacking behavior was previously a bug, but this seemed like a good opportunity to promote it in the future as a feature. Then the controversy hold. Duration of the grenade regeneration buff is no longer random between 1 and 4 seconds and is now fixed at 1.75 seconds. Reduce grenade energy regeneration scalar by 50% in PvP, and then the previous average duration due to waiting as 1.71 seconds, with a 1 second duration being most common, so this should improve the exotic's consistency across the game with a lower return in PvP. Then the Doomfang Pauldrons reduce the super energy gain on activation when an opposing player is killed by a void melee by 50%, no change in PvE. The Shinobu's Vow reduce grenade energy gain on hits by 66%, no change in PvE. The Crown of Tempest grenade, melee, and super energy regeneration scalar buff reduced from 7 seconds to 4 seconds in PvP, no change in PvE. And the Stag reduced the class energy refund on shield break by 50% in PvP, no change in PvE. Then for the armor mods, they say in general we've reduced energy returns from these mods by roughly 50% in PvP depending on the number of copies of the mod you have slotted. So all of these: melee kickstart, grenade kickstart, utility kickstart, perpetuation, bolstering detonation, focusing strike, bomber, outreach, dynamo, distribution, momentum transfer, and impact induction. Alright guys, we still have a lot more changes to go. Firstly, stasis crystals are getting some big changes. So while forming, stasis crystals will now slow nearby players instead of freezing them. They still freeze in PvE, however. Then they increase the slow freeze radius while forming from 1.75 meters to 2.6 meters, because again, you don't freeze solid. Then they reduce the crystal detonation damage versus players by about 55%. They increase the crystal detonation damage in PvE by about 60%, and they increase the crystal detonation radius from 6 meters all the way to 8 meters, so big change there. Okay, now let's move on to each different class. Firstly, for the Hunter. So right now we have Dodge. So Hunter Dodge no longer breaks projectile tracking. Big change there. Also, for Marksman's Dodge specifically, Tier 10 mobility cooldown increased from 11 seconds to 14 seconds, but the base cooldown is unchanged at 29 seconds. For Gambler's Dodge, same thing, Tier 10 mobility, 11 seconds all the way up to 18 seconds actually, and the base cooldown duration from 29 seconds all the way to 38 seconds, guys, a big nerf. Then for the Revenant specifically, okay, Shatter Dive, much less lethal versus players due to stasis crystal changes. However, much more lethal versus combatants due to stasis crystal changes, and they've increased the shatter damage versus PvE combatants by 100%. Shatter Dive was already pretty good in PvE. This is kind of nuts. Then for the Grim Harvest aspect, increased fragment slots from 2 to 3. That was one of my favorite things to use in PvE, guys. I have some insane PvE stasis builds, and now you get an extra fragment? That seems insane. Moving on from there, Top Tree Arc Strider. So for Combination Blow, they've reduced the base cooldown from 96 seconds down to 15 seconds. What the heck? Then for Bottom Tree Night Stalker, for Vanish in Smoke Melee, they reduced the base cooldown from 96 down to 75 seconds. Moving on from there, guys, we have Titans, and definitely one of the biggest changes for shoulder charges. All shoulder charges no longer one-shot players. So just Bungie saying with tuning down all abilities, letting one-shot kill shoulder charges still remain was a bit too much in their opinion, but they're going to be monitoring feedback. Again, that's a huge change. Also, sprint activation time reduced from 1.5 seconds to 1.25 seconds. They increased the range from 5.5 meters to 6.8 meters, and the targeting cone width increased by about 10%, and they increased the damage versus PvE combatants by about 25%. Then specifically for Seismic Strike, the Arc Shoulder Charge, they reduced the area of effect damage from 90 to 40. It now blinds enemies on the area of hit and they increase the base cooldown from 82 seconds to 90 seconds. For Shield Bash, which is the Void Shoulder Charge, reduced AoE damage from 90 to 40. Then they increased the base cooldown from 82 seconds to 90 seconds. Then for Hammer Strike, the Solar Shoulder Charge, reduced direct impact damage from 170 down to 120. Increase the base cooldown from 82 seconds to 90 seconds. So yeah, Shoulder Strikes, got hit hard. Then for Barricade, so Towering Barricade, increased the base cooldown duration from 37 seconds to 40 seconds, and then for Rally Barricade, they reduced the base cooldown from 37 seconds to 32 seconds. Moving on to the Behemoth Stasis subclass specifically for Diamond Lance was super underpowered, but now they've increased the fragment slots from 1 all the way to 3, which is a big deal, and it now spawns a Diamond Lance upon killing a PvE combatant with a stasis weapon, killing 3 players with a stasis weapon in a single life, or killing an enemy with a stasis ability, or shattering an enemy. So you're potentially going to now have to consider putting on Diamond Lance. Then with Shiver Strike, they increase the damage while in Glacial Quake by 50%. For Whisper of Chains, increase the damage resistance versus PvE combatants from 25% all the way to 40%. That's insane. Then we have Bottom Tree Striker. So for Knockout, melee lunge range and melee damage bonus now deactivate after a melee kill, so you can't keep chaining together melee kills. Then for Trample, super energy gain from Fist of Havoc light attack now decays to minimum amount over 3 PvP kills, down from 7. Then the Frontal Assault melee increased the base cooldown from 82 seconds to all the way up to 106 seconds. The Fist of Havoc heavy slam radius reduced from 8 meters to 6 meters, bottom tree only. Moving on from there, guys, the Warlock. Firstly, with the uncharged melee, Warlocks for a long time haven't been able to melee back as quickly as Titans and Hunters, but that's actually changing. So they actually reduced the melee range from 5.5 meters to 4.5 meters, so it now matches the other two classes, and then they reduced the suppression time after melee, so they can now melee back to back at the same speed as Hunters and Titans, so all classes are now even with their uncharged melees. Moving on, we have the Middle Tree Voidwalker. So for handheld Supernova, reduced damage versus players, now deals 150 damage maximum. And then they increased the damage versus champions and bosses by 30%, and they increased the projectile range from 12 meters to 14 meters. So it now pushes targets away from the Warlock on detonation. Interesting. And then for Nova Warp, increased damage versus champions and bosses by 30%. Remember, Nova Warp got buffed by 90% or something, 75%, a huge amount with, I think, the most recent season, so this is even more insane. Moving on from there with Shadebinder. So, for Winter's Wrath, they've reduced the Shatter Pulse damage versus enemy supers. So you must now generally freeze and shatter all supers twice to eliminate them. Then with Penumbral Blast, increase proximity detonation radius in PvE by 100%, and then for Bleak Watcher, while Bleak Watcher is equipped, all stasis grenades charge at the Glacier grenade rate. So potentially a little bit of a nerf to how insane Bleak Watcher is in PvE. And guys, there you have it, and oh my goodness, this is really a complete overhaul to ability regeneration in PvP. And I'm very glad I said in PvP. PvE seems to be relatively unchanged. In fact, often these abilities are even more effective in PvE, and I kind of like the difference. You're still going to be able to generate stuff really fast, spam abilities, go to town with abilities in PvE. You get that, heroic become legend feeling, but they're not going to be as spammy and as annoying in PvP. And I think it's definitely due for a tuning down of those in PvP. However, did Bungie go too far? Is making shoulder charges not even one-hit kill a little overboard? We're going to have to wait and see. But certainly, this is the meta shakeup of a lifetime, right? everything is changing. What's good now is not necessarily going to be good when the 30th anniversary launches. And so guys, that is it for the video. I hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.